The rivalry is finally here. We have the Axe Bowl, SVSU versus Northwood. This is one of the most underrated rivalries, or maybe one of the most unknown rivalries, unless you pay attention to D2 athletics, or if you're from the state of Michigan, maybe went to Northwood, maybe went to SVSU, you might know a little bit about this rivalry. But these two teams are teams that aren't extremely excited to see each other on the opposite side of the field. There's a little bit of dislike for each other. In order to talk about the Axe Bowl, I obviously had to bring someone on that had a little bit of experience with the Axe Bowl for 1 year. We'll try to be as unbiased, at least he will try to be as unbiased as possible. But former SVSU football player Liam, how are you doing, man?
Not doing bad, not doing bad. I'm excited to see how Saturday turns out. How about yourself?
Yeah, no, I'm doing good. Excited for this game on Saturday. It's a game that last year, very defensive game. It was a 10-7 win for Northwood, which snapped a streak for SVSU's winning for at least a decent while.
Yeah, like 5, 6,
Yeah,
7 years maybe.
Yeah, so obviously Northwood coming off of a win last year, but obviously completely different teams. We have Mason McKenzie coming back for SVSU to have his second start in the Axe Bowl. We also have Northwood led by Ethan Hamby. He didn't start in the Axe Bowl last year, but he does have, I think, like 10 games of starting experience going into this year. So what's your thoughts on this matchup? You have two teams that are coming into it off of wins, so there's obviously excitement there, but they're coming in off of some confidence too.
Yeah, I saw Northwood played Northern to a pretty close game on Saturday. Saginaw beat Gannon like 49-28. I think it'll be a good game. Both teams definitely Saginaw is going to want to get their get back. That's for sure. And Northwood, this is one of their bigger games every year, if not their biggest. So it'll be it'll be highly competitive.
Yeah, no, it's going to be a game that obviously has veteran players that experienced last year. There's obviously the fact that Northwood wants to keep the axe, keep it painted blue. And then you have SBSU side of things that want to turn that axe red and has that motivation, have kind of like that approach of like this is like a revenge type game. And I'm sure you've probably heard from maybe some SBSU players, or I'm sure being a part of it, there's that quote unquote excitement to be finally playing this game again.
Yeah, no, they'll want to get it back out there, get it painted red as quickly as possible, and get it back in the Saginaw locker room. And yeah,
So, what do you think of this quarterback battle? We have obviously Mason McKenzie back starting for SVSU. He's a basically dual threat quarterback at this point,
yeah,
I think you can really
yeah,
say. And then you have
for
Ethan
sure.
Hamby, maybe a little bit more of a pocket quarterback, at least comparing the two, but he's been able to run a little bit. And like I did say, he does have some starting experience, but do you think it's different going into this game, having starting experience compared to maybe never starting in an Axe Bowl?
Yeah, no, for sure. So last year would have been Mason's second start of the season, third start of his career because he actually started one game as a true freshman on the road at Davenport in 2023. So he was still really young, working with guys, new, not a lot of turnover on the O line for Saginaw. So I think the offense as a unit as a whole is very familiar with each other, knows how to work well together, and I'm sure Coach Brady and the offensive staff there will have a pretty sound game plan coming in, know exactly what they want to do.
Yeah, and then you have the Northwood side of things as well. They have Donovan Brown coming back from last year, which I actually know that he had 13 carries last week, was the leading rusher for Northwood, 156 carries. He can also catch the ball out of the backfield as well. So that's going to be something that obviously SVSU is going to have to keep an eye on. But there's a couple wide receivers I really want to talk about Northwood here that I think could be an interesting matchup, or guys just kind of keep an eye on. I think one of those guys is Case Boost. I probably completely botched your name, so if I did and you're listening to this, I completely apologize for that. He did only have one catch last game, but it was 34 yards. He obviously has experience playing only one catch. While you might look at that and say he wasn't necessarily involved too much, it's still a pretty big play for 34 yards. And also, you had this Northwood team you did mention that they played a close game against Northern. They were still able to score enough points to get that win. And then you also have someone at the wide receiver room that has a little bit more familiarity with the rivalry in Sam Dursa, which
Yep.
is someone that you played with last year. Had 2 catches, 43 yards last week. He's going to have that familiarity about what it's like being that
Yeah.
SVSU side of things. Now, obviously, every single year things change, but it's going to be probably interesting to have kind of like the whole idea of the transfer portal, having people go back and forth between
Back and
teams.
forth. Yeah, no, for sure. Sam I knew pretty well. We played some golf together at Saginaw, and he's a good kid. He's a hard worker. He'll be motivated. I know that, and he's good in the slot. I don't know if I assume they kept him in the slot. I didn't really see any of his catches. He had two for like 43, right? Yeah, so I'm not sure if he's still in the slot. I assume he would be, but he's athletic, he's quick, he's the all my buddies always talked up Sam and how good of a football player he is. So yeah, he'll be ready to go for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you want to kind of talk a little bit more about SVSU's offense? Obviously, we mentioned Mason McKenzie, but there's Terrence Brown Jr. back, who was actually someone that caught a decent amount of passes. He's actually, I think,
Yeah.
the second leading receiver
Yep.
on this team so far. And then you have Brayden Hill, you have Zarek Zelinski, you have guys on this offense that is returning that has certain experience.
Yeah, so with Terrence, I think that ended up just kind of moving him out to the slot. So I was at the first game against Northeastern, and in the backfield you had a lot more of JMO or Michael Jamerson back there. I think he scored 3 touchdowns. So Terrence is more outside now.
Okay.
And then yeah, Braden B. Hill had a great game against Northeastern. I think he had like over 100 yards. Zarek is a big play threat. They got a lot of guys that they've just got a lot of talent on the outside, and they've got a great quarterback that can get him the ball. And like I said, they've got that O line coming back that has some continuity and knows how to play with each other. Been together for a while, so they're gonna have a lot of things in their bag, if I had to guess.
Yeah, it truly seems like both of these offense, one has a quarterback that has certain experience, that has played in quite a few games. Now, obviously, like one of them have played in a few more than the other. One of them has played in the Expo, the other one hasn't. But they also have weapons around them that they're comfortable with, that they really have big play potential, which really truly makes me feel like this game is going to be quite a bit different than last year. I truly think
Yeah,
last year's
yeah.
game was completely defensive. I think this is going to be a game that is going to be like, who's going to score more, obviously who's going to score more points, but who's going to be able to actually get a stat, because I feel like if you look at both of these offenses, you see playmakers all across this lineup.
No, yeah, for sure. Last year was a yeah, it was the opener for Saginaw was against Winona State out in Minnesota, and so they weren't Saginaw had played them the year before, but they're not obviously going to be as familiar with what they're trying to do as Northwood is, especially Northwood's had I know at least one coach, I don't know if he's still there, but came over from Saginaw and stuff like that. So very familiar with each other. It's going to be it'll be less defensive this year, I think, obviously, because last year, like we ran over multiple times already. It was early into Mason's career. It was a super hot game. It was a weird game. Saginaw missed 3 field goals, had a lot of penalties. So there were kind of things that just snowballed on Saginaw's side, at least that I can speak to.
Yeah, and then speaking of field goal kicking, Northwood actually has a kicker in Drew Cady. I believe he is a freshman, went 3 for 3 in the first game, made every extra point. So if this is truly that close of a game, kicking is going to be a huge difference. And then having a freshman that was able to go that way for your first game, pretty good for Northwood, but it's also going to be truly feels like it's going to be kind of down to maybe kicking if it does end up being as close as we think it's possibly could be.
Yeah, and Saginaw struggled in the kicking game last year, so they went into the portal and brought in Tegan Lenderink, I think, and I want to he was from Rockford initially and was playing at Liberty a little bit, so they went into the portal to try to address that too. So they've got a good snap hold kick unit. Shout out my boy Matt Vaughn at Holder and Brendan O'Brien snapping. So it'll be a yeah, if it comes down to kicking, it'll be never know what can happen, especially with the freshman on the other side.
Yeah, I was just going to say, obviously, you know quite a few SVSU guys, but you were a holder at SVSU, so you probably understand maybe a little bit more of just kind of the way things work at SVSU for like kicking, holding, all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah,
definitely feel like you understand that a little bit more than
yeah,
most people would.
yeah. No, I'd hope I do at least. Yeah,
Exactly. So we've talked about obviously the offense. We've talked about specific players to kind of keep an eye on for, but obviously there's two sides of the ball, right? There's offense. We've talked about how there's playmakers, but there's defense as well. And you have certain players on each of these defenses that I truly think are going to be guys to kind of keep an eye on for. For SVSU, you can kind of go into a little bit more depth on maybe some of these players, but you have a guy in Adam Leduc who has half of the team sacks with 2 sacks on the year. You have Christian Boivin is a leading tackler, had a decent year so far, 26 tackles at the linebacker position. Now, if you look at the stats, if you looked at forced turnovers, haven't had an interception, yes, but they did have a forced fumble, giving up 28 points per game in the first 2 games. What are your thoughts on this SVSU defense? What do you think Northwood's going to see? What should fans be looking for? Are these the players that fans should be looking for? Is there anyone that you think else that could really make a difference in this game?
yeah. No, so Saginaw, the 2 years I was there, had obviously dominant defense. They had guys. I want to say it, at least three Division I transfers out after last season. Brandon Rolls, Eli Gordon, Jasper Beeler. So a lot of changeover. You lose guys like Micah Kretzinger, Fred Daly, Leo Henry. So they went into the portal, brought in Christian Boivin, as he mentioned. He's actually a national champion from Michigan. They brought in Brandon Lewis, safety from Michigan State. They brought in June Chung from Michigan Tech. So they brought in a lot of guys in the portal. And then, like you said, Adam Leduc has been there. He's been a beast since I got there. They've got a number of other guys. They got Braden Corser who's stepping into a role from Detroit Catholic Central. Tyreek Hill is a Tyreek. Tyree Hill is a JUCO transfer from Iowa Western who's really getting run. Colin Kratz. There are a ton of guys you could go through top to bottom that are going to be flying around, and Coach Clayton will have them coached up well. It was also Coach Clayton, the Saginaw defensive coordinator. It was his first Axe Bowl last season, so he'll be more familiar with what they're trying to bring at him. And I think you'll just see a team that's hungry and is going to fly to the football, and there's not going to be too many missed assignments.
Yeah, that's truly the biggest thing about this rivalry is that both of these teams know each other so well. Like you have kind of the tendencies for both sides. I know Coach Brady has been there for obviously a few years. The head coach for Northwood, I believe last year or maybe 2 years ago was his first year. So obviously there's a little bit of not familiarity there, but now obviously familiarity with last year's Axe Bowl. But speaking of a couple of guys that are familiar with SVSU, I'm sure SVSU is familiar with them. But you have DB and Cole Simpson. He was all over the field last week, had 7 tackles, second most last year. And then you have Joe Lathers, who is really the guy in the center, the linebacker, leading tackler. He was also one of 3 Alpha Wolves players defensively for Northwood last year. Cole Simpson was actually one of those as well. So I truly think those are going to be 2 guys that are really going to be guys to keep an eye on for. But they did give up 390 some odd yards defensively last week. Didn't give up a ton of points though, 18 points. So I don't know if it was more of a bend but don't break type defense. If that's the way it kind of goes, maybe that's going to play a into Northwood's favor. I don't know. It was also week one for them
Yeah,
as well, so it does take a little bit of time to get used to.
yeah.
But with that familiarity with this teams, what's your approach going into this game? If you're the players, if you're the coaches, obviously, like we said, it's the Axe Bowl. There's probably dislike for each other. Is it that extra motivation, or is it more of just like, hey, we know them about as well as they know us?
Well, first off, I'm not trying to throw any disrespect around, but I think Saginaw Saginaw's offense has an immense amount of more talent than a Northern Michigan offense would. So it'll be interesting to see how Northwood can adjust to more explosive players on the outside if they do kind of play a bend don't break style once they get into the red zone. But I think on Northwood's side last year will just give them a ton of belief and that they did it at their place. That's started a pretty good season for them. I don't do you know what they ended up exactly last year? I know they ended up putting together a pretty good season, and I'm sure that was the starting point. And then I think in Saginaw, it's back at home. It's everybody knows exactly what happened last year. Like you said, it was a 10-7 game. It did not go to plan at all for Saginaw. That you could argue that ultimately ended up keeping them out of the playoffs, as the Michigan Tech game in week 11 would have been very different, and you would have had a 9-2 potentially Saginaw team with losses to only Grand Valley and Ferris, each by one score. So I think the Saginaw coaches, players, everyone alike are very, they're not really overthinking this. They know what needs to get done. They're going to, I'm sure they're preparing all week. They got practice tomorrow morning. They're going to iron everything out, and they're going to know it's just win and move on. They're not going to put too much stock into what happened last year or the rivalry. They're just going to approach it as they should and try to take care of business.
Yeah, so they were 6-5
Okay.
last year, but in the second
Yeah.
year, I believe, under the
Yeah,
coach.
I think the year before they were significantly worse. So I'm sure that win last year gave Northwood a different confidence than they had in the past.
Yeah, possibly, and obviously every single rivalry game you're going to be playing, there's going to be that motivation. There's going to be
Yep.
the factor in there. You know Northwood's going to come in ready. You know SVSU is going to come in ready. It's at SVSU, so obviously home crowd behind SVSU, but there's that confidence from Northwood last year from getting the win, keeping it a low score. And I truly think that, at least in my opinion, it plays into SVSU if it's a little bit more of a high scoring game. And I truly think it's going to play into Northwood's factor if it's a little bit of a lower scoring game. I just think that if Northwood can play that quote unquote bend but don't break, or maybe they fix some things, or maybe last week, obviously, with week one, with it being just the first week of the season, there's going to be miscommunication. There's going to be issues. I'm sure that they'll get those things figured out. And they have veteran guys over there that can really, truly figure out. But I think it's going to be really interesting to see if it's going to be anything like last year. I truly don't think the score last year will be anything close to what it was this year.
Yeah, no, I don't either. I think it's just too much. There's just been too much growth from in the past year. Like it'll be it would be really, really, really hard. And again, this is no disrespect to Northwood. It would just be really hard for me to see any world in which they hold Saginaw to only 7 points because the weapons Saginaw's had, the recruiting classes under Coach Brady have just been on the steady incline. And those players, some of those players that are in my grade now in their third year, redshirt sophomore year, are finally coming on the field and getting to make their impact and making a name for themselves and stuff like that.
Yeah. So with that being said, we're going to obviously give our predictions. If you want to give a score, you can do so. But we all we all know probably the way you're going, but what's your prediction for
No,
this
you go
game?
first. You go first. You go
I'll
first.
go first. So I'm going to guess it's going to be a closer game than you think it will be. I do have SVSU winning. I do think it's going to be a pretty competitive game. I do think that Northwood will be able to score. I think they will get some things figured out defensively in this game. I think they're going to be better than what they were against Northern. But with that being said, I think we have an SVSU win. I think it'll be like something like 27-20, maybe like a one possession, or maybe like a 10-point kind of game. It's going to be one of those games where you end up going out at the end and you know that was a really close game, but it just end up being the home team end up winning just at the end. That's my prediction.
Yeah, so I'm I don't know what we're gonna do, but
I
the
see the
axe is
red.
coming back red. That's my guarantee, or like I said, it's my prediction. It's not a guarantee, but the axe is gonna be red after Saturday again, and I'm gonna go. I think Saginaw handles them this year. I think they're stick to business, stay on the task at hand, and I think they get them like 34-10.
Okay. Interesting choice. I obviously knew you were going to go that way, but I didn't
Yeah,
necessarily know the score. I knew it was going to be more than my 7 to 10 points.
yeah, no, yeah. I think Northwood will compete. I just think Saginaw's got too much talent now, and they had more talent last year, but it's just the familiarity of the offense, the game plan on defense, more settled in year two. Everything year two starting QB, year two DC. Coach Brady getting even better calling plays. I think Saginaw rolls.
We will see. We'll do a recap after the game happens. We'll see if you're happy. We'll see exactly what happens. We'll see if it gets painted red. We'll see if it gets kept blue. It'll obviously be a fun game that we'll both be keeping an eye on for. But truly, best of luck to both teams. I truly mean it. Um, I'm sure that Liam will definitely be cheering a little bit harder for SVSU in this game, but I'm just going to be interested to see what the final results is, and we're going to see which side is happy at the end of the day when it comes on Saturday.
Yeah, it'll be fun to see. I think you're gonna get a Zarek Zielinski touchdown and maybe a player I didn't mention yet, but he'll be flying around on special teams, James McDonald. So
Okay,
there, yep, we'll
there,
see. Both of them will make an impact.
there's a little bit. We don't condone betting at all in D2, but there's maybe a little
Yeah,
bit of predictions there. Just no
yeah,
betting, obviously, but yeah.
no, just straight prediction.
Exactly. So, yeah, no, really excited for this game. Obviously, that will do it for the preview. We'll come back with a recap. We'll be seeing if Liam is wearing red or not red at that point, depending on the result. But
Yep.
yeah, thank you for everyone tuning in. Hopefully, you enjoyed this preview and definitely tune in to the recap coming up sometime next week.
Yeah, and if you're not doing anything Saturday, tune into the game. It'll be worth your time.
Absolutely. Definitely agree.